whatsoever. But I was brought into this project from a strategic perspective to help kind of align a lot of the things that have been going on for these projects. And I've been involved in TigerData since the beginning. So when I started in research computing 5 years ago, I started taking on the role of proposal creation, understanding the vision, working with all of our faculty. So I have a lot of that information to give. But if you do have any questions related to technical or related to anything that's more advanced than my current knowledge, I can direct you to a member of my team. So where are we? All right, so a little bit background on TigerData specifically at Princeton. Princeton, we are a very small centralized school. I think that's something that gets forgotten quite often. We don't have professional schools or medical schools. Our main focus is on the graduate and undergraduate education. And so with that, there's some of our numbers here. I think as of yesterday, we now have 33 Nobel Prize winners. So research is to the core of our mission and really, really important to kind of what we do here. And TigerData was kind of the brainchild of that, as we realized that supporting this increasing trend of data growth and data usage and computation with the services that we were offering before TigerData, we weren't able to do that. So TigerData does leverage about 200 petabytes of heterogeneous storage. It's managed by MediaFlux, which is a robust metadata software system that does our storage management and metadata management. And it allows for us to simplify data management through customizable metadata schemas and supporting a vast array of the research domains that we have. We have TigerData accessible through a web-based browser, also through command line interfaces and mount points and Globus. And we are setting it up to be a very easy access point for all of our researchers to store redundant, resilient data at Princeton University through a centralized service. So again, one of the things, because we're so small, we don't have the competition related or between different kind of schools. We are centrally supported, centrally funded, centrally managed. So TigerData, so the vision is that TigerData provides the Princeton community with the necessary tools, infrastructure, expertise to manage data effectively and securely at scale. So advancing the long-term sustainability of research and institutional data and facilitating collaboration, promoting the preservation and reusability of data and code. So this is all kind of focusing on that FAIR model, the findable, accessible, interoperable, and retrievable. So TigerData is a comprehensive set of these data storage and management tools and services. So we provide storage, capacity, reliability, functionality, and performance. We're built off of change, so we need to rapidly support the changing research landscape and enable new opportunities for leveraging the power of this institutional data through sharing and collaboration. And it includes data management tools and services that are in concert with a community of practice that enables the researchers and data managers to describe and tag research materials, move them between different tiers of architectural storage, and be able to easily find and reuse their code for collaboration. So the goal is that the result of this ecosystem will facilitate research and contribute to that stewardship of knowledge that Princeton has become known for, and would be able to enable the reusability and preservation of that data and code at Princeton University. I hit the wrong button. Okay, sorry. Just one other thing to mention, I kind of touched on it before. TigerData is centrally funded right now, with the exception of very large-scale data users, like over a petabyte of users. There is no chargeback model for TigerData. So I know this is something that's kind of extreme in our world of the cost of storage rising. We are promoting the use or the data management culture by dangling that carrot and stick that says, we'll give you all the storage, you just have to manage your data first. And so this is kind of one of those key contributing factors to us being able to go from a storage management system to a data management system. And just a little bit on timeline, this project was initiated in 2021. We got the proposals created and we got it funded in 2022 with an expansion of funding for team and technology last year. And then the budget did include staff expansions in my team within research computing and the libraries team. And we also work in conjunction with some other departments. Okay. So that leads us to how we are organized to create this project. So we have a faculty-led governance between steering committees and user groups at Princeton. We always say the inmates run the asylum. The faculty have the last say in a lot of the stuff that is done. We run by committee. And there's a lot of power given to the faculty that are saying it. So unfortunately, we are not a top-down, what we say goes. So we are centralized and small, but we do a lot of things by this committee, which gets to be challenging at times. But it also helps us keep an ear to the grindstone of what the trends are in research and what our faculty actually need. This project was initiated primarily by two main groups. One is the Dean for Research and Research Computing, which is where I am housed. I handle all the hardware, all the software, the technical service management, and the overall project leadership. So that all falls into the Research Computing and Dean for Research shoulders. And then we partner with the University Library, and they handle the data management training, metadata schemas, and then the custom user interface. So they're handling more of kind of that front end review. We handle all the technical hardware, and then we partner together with governance and leadership provided by a faculty committee of about 7 faculty members and some administrative leadership. And we organize kind of the direction that things are going there. Questions so far? Okay. A little bit about the research landscape at Princeton, just so you see how TigerData fits into all of this, because the way we have taken how we've gone between changing this culture from storage management to data management is first you have to understand kind of what our platform looks like from a research landscape perspective. And this is primarily what we are. Okay, so TigerData is a big part of that. We're about 230 petabytes of by the book storage purchased with my funding. That's our data management service. We also have Citadel, which is our secure research infrastructure. That's what we consider level 4. Anything regulatory and compliant required goes into Citadel. We also have four main clusters and a teaching and learning cluster. And we also have some cloud computing primarily for some advanced functionality, and that's relatively minimal. So from our platform here, Citadel has its own storage for secure research infrastructure. TigerData has the lion's or the tiger share of storage across the university. And all of our clusters have some version of Scratch storage tied to them, right? So high performance storage, and then we have resilient, redundant, longer term storage, which is what we're kind of considering in this TigerData realm. Okay. So this is our storage landscape. So when I talk about storage at Princeton, I'm responsible for all of this, but we treat it all a little bit differently. Scratch is single copy use for use on our clusters. We have about 25 total petabytes across our 3 main clusters for usage within Scratch. This is one single copy, very performant, very fast, okay? Projects is kind of our middle tier. This was the only thing we had before TigerData was introduced. And TigerData Projects is about 25 petabytes as well. It's about the same amount as that we have for Scratch. This is a second copy that's made. It is cluster adjacent. It is redundant and used for the non-volatile files, but this is kind of more of our redundant. It's still fast, but it's not going to be tied into compute nodes. So Scratch is tied into compute nodes. Projects and TigerData are both tied into head nodes. And then TigerData is, again, cluster adjacent. It's redundant and resilient in certain regards. And the main difference here is when you get to TigerData, data management is required. All right, so our legacy systems are our Scratch and projects. Right now, there's no data management required when we're setting those up. However, we are in some efforts to kind of modify that and understand what we're talking about, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. TigerData, in order for you to get a project in TigerData, you must fit our data management schema, and you must provide specific details about access, users, and the project itself in order for us to understand what that data is. And again, with that comes certain privileges, like amount of storage that you have available. So to access TigerData right now, we'll focus a little bit on TigerData, then I'll talk about kind of how we're kind of leveling the playing field across all the areas. So with TigerData, you can be a direct user through NFS or SMB mounts. We are working on an S3 mount as well that I believe is coming in the next several months. But you can be a direct user and have it directly mounted. You can be a web user and have it go through the GUI in our web application, or you can directly access it through Globus, and we can set up Globus collections for everything that's in TigerData. MediaFlux is our vended software of choice for metadata management. So this serves as our storage management and our metadata platform that ties in for all the data stores that we have behind it. And our data stores, we have 3 unique types of data storage from different vendors behind MediaFlux right now that is pretty seamless to the requester, to the user. They don't necessarily have to know what storage that they're using. So this talks a little bit about what we have. The user interface itself, our TigerData.princeton.edu website is a good place for some just front-end information. We do have a web app behind there for people who are Princeton users and who have access to projects. Our middleware is MediaFlux. It's an Australian company that is about 22 years old. They are primarily focused on the metadata management piece. They are a metadata company, and so we have them as our middleware. And then these are all of our different types of heterogeneous storage that we have. So we have Dell PowerScale and Dell ECS cloud storage, we have IBM object storage, we have IBM Spectrum Scale, and the IBM tape libraries. The Diamondback tape libraries are set here. So this kind of all together comes up with over 240-ish petabytes of purchase storage. I'm going to touch on this real quick. This kind of just, I can share the slides afterwards. This talks a little bit more about all the different integrated parts we have for our architecture, the metadata catalog that's done through a Ruby on Rails, that's our user interface, and that makes it TigerData, our management interface protocols, authentication, the governance layer that we have, and then the storage that we have structured out. Okay, so now how do we change from storage management to data management? So historically, all we did was we just kept saying yes, right? We bought new disks, we expanded their quotas, and whoever came to us asking for storage, we said yes. So historically, our contribution model for compute for clusters was focused more on compute than on storage. So I think until probably about the last 4 or 5 years, we never really had an issue with how much storage we had tied to compute. Now we're starting to see that with the trends are the amount of data is increasing, the amount of computational users are increasing. So we never really thought about funding storage separately. We had to start giving that some thought as we started hitting the projections of data growth, especially as new multi-million-dollar instruments were purchased as part of, a faculty package where we needed to figure out how we were going to store all this stuff. Starting out, we would set quote at 1 terabyte, then increase it as they requested until space was gone, right? It was the first person across the line. We would give out quota as they asked. We never did any kind of justification or any kind of reason. We would over allocate our quota. And then when it came down to it, we would say, oh, okay, great. We need to buy more storage. And we would add more disk. And what that has led to is that we have about 40% dormancy on our legacy Scratch and projects where the data just hasn't been touched. It hasn't been used. And so when we're looking at it, we're going to run out of, even with a dedicated HPCRC, with a data center, we're looking at not having enough space or not having the wherewithal to be able to support all this ongoing, right? We are seeing a 35 to 40% year-over-year growth in data storage, and we are not able to actively support that. So the answer of data management kind of came into play, but this requires a lot of changes. And one thing I'll say it now and I'll say it at the end is that your culture will always eat your strategy for breakfast, right? So you have to know the people that you're dealing with. And with our faculty, this was what they were used to. They asked for it, they were given it. We needed to buy it, we bought it, we never charged them for it, and we would just keep adding it. So as we started thinking about how we were going to change this, we had to figure out how do we do that without a revolt of the faculty and researchers, but also with making it crystal clear how we could use these services to our advantage. And so with that, we went to this, the goal is data management, but we were promoting this idea of data awareness to prepare for data management. And things were when we started with TigerData, we were trying to domino the project in such a way that TigerData would come on and it would make the end of life for some of our Scratch hardware and our projects hardware, or the fact that we were at 70+% capacity of some of our GPFS storage, which is where my storage engineers, the sky starts falling and we start getting really concerned. But we were at a point when TigerData was just getting funded and just coming up, where all of our other storage that we had was at capacity. We couldn't expand quotas. We were trimming quotas without people really knowing because we were trying to find some space, and there was no space for growth. So one of the things that kind of worked for us is while we're promoting this data awareness to kind of get towards data management, we also have these stories of people remember the pain points from 22, 23, 24, where we had no space to give and their research was suffering. So we started this kind of across our Scratch and projects specifically, we started this effort of talking to our people who were requesting projects about their data awareness, that they knew what they had. A lot of our faculty had grad students or postdocs requesting space, but then they didn't even know what was stored in there. And so we wanted to make sure that we were doing that. And so we did this, we started changing our culture in a couple different ways over the last couple of years. One, we want to make sure that we're using our storage tiers appropriately. This meant defining them and reminding people that, yeah, you can store, 50 terabytes of data on Scratch, but it's single copy, it's not backed up, and we're not responsible for it. It should be lost. And we wanted to make sure people were understanding that. And that meant us defining our tiers and what was acceptable and what those ranges were. We promoted the moving of data to TigerData, right? So we gave them this whole, project that could be set up with lots of extra space here to move their data and help set up how data movements could work. We are working on more proactively managing quotas. We, again, have never historically said no at Princeton to our faculty. We are now starting to at least push back a little bit and say, what do you need? What does that mean? What's your timeline on it? What do you see your year over year growth look like? And have people actually think about what they're putting in and whether it's actually needed. And you'd be amazed at how many people, because they've never been asked before, say, oh, you know, you're right. I don't really need this. This is duplicate, or I can just as easily recreate it than I can store it. And so we're starting to have these conversations so that we can better manage quotas. Couple other things that are really interesting is we're monitoring the trends in data. So like I mentioned before, we're seeing about a 35% year over year growth in data storage, which is insane. If you think about right now, we're at a 200 petabyte scale. I'd say about 100 plus petabytes of that is first copy. If that grows year over year, financially, even Princeton can't keep up with that. So we're monitoring the trends in data specifically for our large instrument users. And to do that, we're preparing better for the instrument purchases. So Princeton likes to lure talented researchers and faculty to Princeton with the promise of the instruments that they need to be able to do their research and funding their labs. What we were noticing is they were giving the $5 million for the telescope, but nothing for storage, which meant that you'd have a telescope or a microscope that could generate 10 terabytes, 15 terabytes a day, but you had nothing to actually store that on, which is the equivalent, I always say, of giving a kid a remote control car for Christmas without any batteries to play with it, right? So what we're trying to do is promote that conversation earlier on where they don't have the $5 million instrument already installed with nowhere to store it. But the fact that if you're going to commit this for a researcher to come here, we also have to commit to whatever it needs to be able to support that, whether that be compute nodes or whether that be storage. And this has been a really good conversation in getting us to understand, especially our big data generation departments, how that is. Because one thing we've noticed is that there's an equity issue in data storage where the amount of data that's needed is not necessarily controllable based on what subject you're studying, right? If you're in humanities, you might only need a terabyte of storage over the entire life, and you're able to do all this work and get this funding. But if you talk to our genomics people, they might need, a terabyte a day because of the amount of data that they're generating just to be able to do the same amount of research that gets the same amount of funding. And so we have to be very, very aware of that. And so having those conversations and understanding trends in data growth, preparing for the instruments, and understanding kind of what that means, where, just because a faculty member might need 8 petabytes a year for their data storage doesn't necessarily mean it fits into our model. So we also do have to explore a researcher-funded storage model as well, right? There are some people that are just generally over that. And how we've done this is kind of our scratch, well, I shouldn't say scratch, our draft approach at quota ranges. So like I said, Princeton doesn't change lightly. We've been around for 300 years. We don't have policies, so to speak. We'll start with practices and we'll just start seeing if we get any kind of pushback and adjust them. And this is slowly what we've been introducing over the last 6 months. And I did mention, scratch and projects were all at capacity. April of 2025 was the first time we were not at capacity on like more than 50% of our storage. Like we were finally at a point where like everything is really under that 60%, 50% mark. And so this was a really great time for us to present to our faculty and our researchers, this is what our recommended quota ranges are, right? If you're working on Scratch, really up to 20 terabytes, we're fine with, we'll give it to you. Anything up to 50 terabytes, let's have a conversation. And that, at least that little bit of pushbacks makes them think about their data and think about what they're actively needing to use. And 50 terabytes or over, again, we're faculty focused, would require a committee review and approval. And again, that might vary depending on their contribution to the cluster, depending on contribution to actual storage, but for the most part, the free part of this is kind of what we're doing. And for projects, we tiered it up a little bit, give them up to 50 terabytes. Above 50 terabytes needs justification, committee review and approval, depending on what they're trying to do. And then TigerData right now requests up to 100 terabytes. We just grant, like that's our average right now is between 60 and 100 terabytes, or like what most people will request. Anything up to 500 terabytes, we like a little bit of justification. We want to know what their math looks like, what their year over year growth looks like. We want to get a good feel for what it's going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. And then anything over 500 terabytes does require that committee review. Right now, we've set it at about a petabyte, could potentially require contribution and funding. We haven't hit that just yet with most of our people, but we have had some 500 to 800 terabyte requests that have been asked for. And one last thing I'll mention right now, projects is still its own separate tier for the next 3 or so years. Project will be absorbed into TigerData as well. That's more performance storage, so that's more GPFS than object. But we are looking at, again, still having these tiered level of approaches where we can move data through these practices without having to with giving them like a little bit more as they go, with still making it functional for them to do research. Okay. We recommend that they use TigerData, right? So TigerData is organized by project or lab. There's a data sponsor identified that is employed by Princeton. Data, as long as the data is not immediately used on compute nodes of clusters, right? We can do it on their head nodes, and they don't require heavy read write. TigerData is great. We are amping that up. So every month we get closer and closer to more performance storage and being able to access closer to the clusters. But Scratch will always be the primary storage that's required to be used on the clusters. We have a couple different ways there. And again, I referenced our website. I talked a lot about this already. So the monitoring the trends and instruments. Data dormancy is a big one for us. We're hoping data management helps us at least understand things better and be able to tier things off even within TigerData with the multiple tiers of storage we have. But understanding what we're doing for dormancy across the board is helpful. We are also using media flux right now to scan projects and our Scratch systems on all of our clusters to understand the dormancy there, what the basic, POSIX fields are, so the basic data tied to that, so that we can start aligning a standard foundation for all data storage usage at Princeton, which would require very specific minimal metadata schema across the board so that we can start comparing apples to apples, right? When someone wants a project in Scratch, we can move them to projects and then to TigerData, and you can have like a very easy workflow that has data movement back and forth, all leveraging the same information tied to the same data sponsor or data managers, where we actually have an owner and someone that we know who is aware of that data. And how we increase the data awareness is really by working directly with research labs to understand their storage needs and storage growth. So a lot of this, you can't get around actually understanding what someone needs and what they're working on. And this changes across the different areas of the university, right? Our social scientists versus our humanities versus our physical or natural scientists all have different requirements. And so we've been doing a lot of work within our team to be able to start understanding that, planting the seed of data management of kind of those required fields, but just understanding that the more they understand about their data, the easier it's going to be for us to be able to manage that. And then the more storage we'll be able to provide them, right? If we're tiering things off, there's going to eventually be certain levels of storage they'll be able to have. So technically for us, that means moving towards lab or project-based organization of data, not just net ID or general user ID. We want to have some kind of hierarchy there. And then the entry-level required metadata fields are simple. And then we're trying to create those parity among all of those standard tiers so that we can, we at least understand what we're looking at. We're kind of leveling the playing field. And so this leads us to our required metadata. So when I talk about metadata management, we're working on some customizable metadata fields. We've started with some base level required ones that have gotten no pushback. So these are kind of the basic fields that a lot of this stuff is general knowledge for them. They're able to identify. It doesn't require too much extra thought or extra processes, but we do require the name of data sponsor and data manager, and we have rules about who those can be. And then they have their project descriptions, their storage and access needs, and then an additional project information and the provenance. Our project IDs are unique identifiers. We create DOIs for every single project in TigerData. So this again aligns with the eventual vision of that data being published or becoming more open. And those are draft DOIs that are then I set up and published for each of those projects. So once they get to that point of publication, they can take them from draft to active. But for right now, that aligns the basic ID there. And this right now is accessed through a user so you can command line. A lot of our computational users are based on the command line. We do it based on our user interface. I'm in that fun role where I know about it, but I don't have any access. So this is just screenshots from one of my peers. When they log in, any projects that they have would be listed, identifies whether they're active, if there's any information or anything that's going on here. These are all just kind of in progress. But it would tell you how much storage of them has been used, and then you can open up the project and it'll give you some of if there was content in here, it would tell you the content, and then it would tell you who the project details belong to. So here's all some project details, tells you the storage capacity and what's requested and versus what's been approved. And we have a new project request form that can be filled out. So when you're a Princeton user and you validate or authenticate into the TigerData app, you can give it your project title, the directory, and I set that, what the project purpose is and description, the departments or multiple departments if there are some, identify your storage needs. And so we kind of start out here, and then if it goes over that, we have to look at it. And then any kind of details that we have identified that would help us identify the type of mounts that they would possibly need, whether they need Globus, if there's a specific justification we need to make for putting it in one type of storage over another. So depending on the number of files estimated or the size of files, that those details can be added. And then we identify who the data sponsor is, the data manager, and then I can add data users and read-write access. So I can go ahead and control my initial project creation here, and then that'll automatically get created in MediaFlux and create the project space for them. Okay, done a lot of talking. So again, I'm just going to state, for us, culture eats strategy for breakfast. One of the reasons this project, I think, was very successful is it wasn't implemented in a top-down strategy, approach. We went through and actually talked. We had faculty across all 6 domains of research at Princeton involved. We had talked to them and iterate on what they think that they need and what we have proven out that they've needed. And we've been bringing them to the table to have any of these conversations as we formulate these practices that we start implementing and these pushbacks that we start implementing. And what we found with a lot of these faculty is they want us to start with their postdocs and grad students, right? So the younger we start with people knowing that this data management is necessary and knowing some of the training that's available and knowing how we can do them, the easier and the better that it is for us to continue to become programmatic and cultural with this data management and this data awareness approach. And it has taken some time, I think more time probably for our internal technical team, who's just so used to providing, right? Where we don't necessarily say no, we figure out how to say no nicely, but figuring out how we talk to, include them in the conversation and make them a partner in the conversation so that the service that they've had would be successful. And I will say TigerData, we've been funded and rolling out since 2021, just went live, like out of early adopter stage, but just went live in January. And we have an average of about 5 project requests a week. And this is with no external promoting. It's just a need and a use and word of mouth. And so we have about 150 some projects that have been created that are actively in use and more requests that come in on a daily basis and start working with that. And then to manage this, it's really a community of practice. So with all of our users who have created projects and they're sponsoring faculty, we listen, acknowledge, and follow up. So it's one of those things we're asking the questions instead of just granting what they're asking for. The earlier, the better at making sure that, at least for our culture at Princeton, making sure that they're a part of it, because that translates. There's the similar faculty that sit on a lot of these different committees, and it's really helpful having them advocating and representing the need for this kind of storage and data management pieces. We focus on our faculty, where we feel like usability and input is necessary, we rely back on our faculty. So we have faculty-led governance groups. They confirm the vision for us. We have focus groups to provide insight, feedback, and help provide prioritization of those enhancements. And we are working on setting up online spaces for collaboration. We have trainings that are offered to bring the groups together, and we bring their voices together through the implemented changes with trying to build up these user groups on campus so we can understand that. I think that's the question. Chat's going in. I haven't been looking at the chats though. Any question? I think there are questions. How do you want to do questions?
Yeah, actually, we have quite a few questions and they're being translated into the document. So I'll just go ahead and start reading them if that's all right with you, Beth.
Yeah, fantastic.
So the first one was, if there's no charge for storage, how is the project funded? And I think you said it was centrally funded, but maybe you can give more specifics.
Yeah, Princeton went into our Scrooge McDuck vat of money and provided us our capital funding. So right now we're some on capital funding and some on capital funding and some operational for our staffing, but we are still based off central funds. So our funds are based off of our endowment or any other budgeting that comes in. It's not grant related.
Okay. David, I see you're raising your hand. Do you want to ask the next question, or do you have a different question related to funding?
Sure. I was just wondering, whether there's a long-term funding strategy. Obviously, initial capital purchase will age out at some point. That'll need to be replaced. Also, you mentioned staffing, and I was wondering what the staffing requirements look like for this.
Yeah. So funding wise, so we are still trying to figure out what the best approach is for ongoing funding. So we do have an ongoing for staffing and for base software and for general trending increase in hardware needs. However, when you have 200 petabytes of storage, of which I think 70 petabytes was installed in the same year, when that hits out of warranty, that's a big hit. So we've been using the last 2 years to figure out what our trending increases, if it actually is the 35% or if data management brings it any bit. But we have commitments for ongoing funding. We're just figuring out whether we beef up our operational funding to include these big lift and shifts for replacement of all the hardware, because everything is on premises at Princeton, right? So nothing is cloud-based right now funded. It's all on premises in our data centers. And so we're trying to figure out if it makes sense for us to beef up our operational budget every year, or do we just do capital asks with an expectation that those capital asks come every 3 to 5 years for this kind of replacement? So that's kind of the answer there. So there's a commitment to the funding, because yes, capital funding will run out, but the service itself is funded. It's just a lot to say I need $10 million a year trying to plan on replacing 100 petabytes of storage, especially with the cost the way that they're going. So that's a still, and we wanted to use actual data growth within data management services to be able to do that. As far as the team, we are funded at, there's 10 people that were funded through this project. I have a team of 2 storage engineers that oversee the full 270 petabytes of storage that's under my purview. Half of it's TigerData, the other half of it's the Scratch and projects tiers. And I have 4 people who are responsible for the media flux side of things. That includes our strategy around the metadata layer and the software management layer, as well as the technical service oversight and management. So our coordination with this community of practice and with our users. And so there's kind of 6 on my team, and there's 4 others that are tied within the library. So 2 are in the Princeton Research Data Service group. They're responsible for data management training and the metadata schemas. And then we have 2 developers who are dedicated to the user interface being built. So technically, where there was 10 brand new positions created for this project, and one of the storage engineers we had before this came on. But there's 11 people tied directly to this project, plus some resources that are representing library storage efforts and the Office of Information Technology storage efforts that help contribute. So this is very much many cooks in the kitchen, and it's a very elaborate matrix organization that helps manage it.
Okay, hopefully that addressed your question.
Thank you.
And that's being recorded again in the document. The next question was about that you already addressed about the 250 petabytes of data being on-prem, and you said that it's all on-prem, so that one was addressed. If you offer free storage, how do you control abuse?
So right now we're doing that with showback, so not chargeback, but showback. And we are historically, Princeton has never controlled kind of the usage of things. It becomes available. We are starting to put more of these metrics and management of the usage, make them more available to our faculty governance and our faculty groups. But for the most part, we are still small enough that the abuse, so to speak, has not gotten completely out of hand, and people normally want to be good citizens. So it's just a matter of working with them to understand what they are using. And we have that now with a very elaborate metrics dashboard that shows the projects and how much is used and how much quota increases we've done over a certain amount of time. So what we've learned from not having that with our Scratch and projects, we have implemented within TigerData to do more of a showback than a chargeback.
The next question is the tiering transparent to users? Do they initiate it, or is it automatic?
Tiering, once you're within TigerData, the tiering is transparent. We are working on specific kind of watermarks and thresholds for when we put things there. We're still trying to figure out best use for all the storage, but for the most part, the guarantee is that you have redundant storage. Sometimes it's resilient and redundant if we put it into object. For the most part, unless there's a specific need for S3 or for something with object, everything will go into our Isilon and then be backed up into our tape libraries. And sometimes it'll go directly onto object depending on the need. So we're still figuring out, again, with whether it's a large amount of small files, whether it's medium-sized files, but they're different kinds. They're videos. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means. But for right now, it's been pretty transparent to the users, but we do guarantee multiple copies in multiple data centers too. So we have 4 different data centers that have everything stored across our campus.
And Dave, do you have a follow-up question to this?
Yeah, sorry, I have lots of questions. I'll try to space them out. You mentioned TigerData is also sort of directly mountable. I assume that's like read-only, or
No,
is there some ability to write back?
It's based on their access controls. So some people will only have read-only and they can mount it, but other people can read-write and they can access it.
Okay, and how do you control Like if folks are writing files back to the storage, for example, or modifying files, is MediaFlux sort of aware of
Yep, everything
all
goes
of that? And
yeah, so everything that's in TigerData proper is managed by MediaFlux, which means you go through MediaFlux with all of your controls and access controls, and then that accesses your data. So you can move things in and out and do things through there. Scratch and projects right now are outside of TigerData, which means you don't go through MediaFlux, but MediaFlux still scans and knows what's in there. So we do what's called out-of-band scanning. So we're able to kind of manage this. But with TigerData specifically, all the access controls are managed through MediaFlux. So the user authenticates and then they can get their data in and out through the command line or through their basic commands.
okay.
Okay. The next question, can multiple connection types be requested for a share, for example, CIFS and NFS?
Yeah, you can have NFS and SMB for the same share.
Okay. And I think you addressed this one already because you said you have dashboards, but are there ways for users to see how much data storage they have used? I don't know if you want to add anything. I think you've addressed this one
Yeah,
already.
I'll just say, so with the user interface, it shows your quota usage with also command line parity. You can do whatever command line it is. Again, this is beyond my technical, but you can do a basic command line to figure out what your quota is through TigerData as well. So that's all accessible. And then we have a metrics dashboard for more leadership based to understand overall overarching departments, PIs, et cetera, how much storage is actually being used. So I, at any point in time, know how many projects we have, allocated quota, and used quota. And then I can also tell in what tiers it's all being used. So we're really tracking that health because we've been so burned by being at 80% capacity on so many different storage tiers. We've put in all the controls that we know when we're going to get close to, at 60%, we say we need to start thinking about expanding or replacing. And at 80%, we start freaking out. So we're trying to avoid getting to the 60% without any awareness.
Avoid the freak out threshold, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Does MediaFlux support tiering data from one tier to another?
Yes.
Okay. How do you share data with non-Princeton users, collaborators, and non-collaborators?
Yeah. So right now there's two ways. One is through Globus, right? So Globus is a way that they can have a Globus endpoint and they can set up their own access points to get their data in and out and be able to access it. The second, right now, one of the limitations for our initial rollout is they can create a Princeton DCU account. They can create a Princeton account. You have to have a Princeton NetID right now. That said, Grouper was just rolled out at Princeton in the last year, and we're working on figuring out what authentication would look like for external to Princeton people. It's on our roadmap for next year. But right now, we either create them an account, or if they just need to be able to access to add data or pull data, they can do that through Globus.
Okay. How do you define dormancy? How long does data have to be inactive to be considered dormant?
Yeah, that's another tricky one. This is like the big argument I'm always making is that the equity among researchers is different and it's not always apples to apples. And it's the same thing with dormancy, right? So you have someone in astrophysics, for example, who's taking pictures of the sky every day for 6 months, and that's all being generated and kept, but they're waiting until they can do their analysis, right? That's an understood and expected dormancy versus someone who just runs their file or runs their computations, gets the analysis, but then doesn't touch it for the next 6 months. So what we've been doing is very, very broad sense of dormancy, things that haven't been touched over 1 year, 2 year, and 5 year, and getting a good feel of that. And I think our 40% was things that hadn't even been read-only since in 2 years. And that's not a realistic approach to it. It's not going to be something that becomes policy or practice, but it gives us a good idea of where to start. And so we've started some of those explorations about, well, we can't just use whether it's been read or whether it's been modified because, someone can write a Python script and go in and change all that. And just because they know that's what we're looking for, but we are trying to come up with a comprehensive approach. But our initial look was anything that hadn't been touched in 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, gave us a good feel for kind of where that was. And as we go to rolling that out into better practices, it's really figuring out, is there a real reason for this to be dormant for that long? Or is it something where it's a buildup and then they use all these files into one big computation and then it all gets moved out, right? There's that timing of their work. And that's different per tier as well, right? We like less of that on Scratch. We're expecting Scratch to be more short-term and like doing your work and projects for it to be set. So we're trying to combat that a little bit with data movement practices and workflows. But we are aware of it. And I just want to say it's not a fast and a furious, you know, if it hasn't been touched in a year, it's old, it's done. It's not treated that way here. We are looking at it comprehensively, but there are good watermarks. And I think for your institutions, you can figure out what that watermark looks like and if there's difference across the domains. And we've been doing a lot of that data collection.
Okay. Lauren, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask your question because you said you want to articulate, and I'm not sure I know what some of the beginning of your question means. So I'm going to throw it to you.
Just asking for folks in the room from campuses that have not, or that have had to say no more often, what strategies do you use to handle like increase requests for increase in quota, for example, how to support data cleanup? What do you do to curb misuse, abuse, stale data, things like that? I imagine there's a lot of wisdom here in the room, even for the TigerData folks to potentially learn from too.
So we use chargebacks and we stick to it. And that takes the support of the research leadership, which we have on the chargebacks.
Yeah, that's a popular one. I wish. It would be so nice.
So, I mean, I will say we're pretty generous about what we give away for free, though. So we give around across a few different tiers. We give around 200 terabytes for free, and then start charging back after that.
And Dave, remind me, where are you? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. The Jackson Laboratory.
Jackson Laboratory. Okay.
Yeah. So we're private, non-profit research organization.
Okay.
I will say the one thing that we ask now for justification, right? So going from never saying no to starting to say, hey, let's hold up a little bit. How much do you need? How much of that do you need today versus what's your growth? What's your growth look like in 2 years? If your growth is look like in 2 years, do you expect more new instruments coming on? Are you generating it, acquiring it? Are you how are you kind of getting the data? And then it's also how long do you need it on those tiers? So for us, because we move from scratch to projects down to TigerData, it's how long until you expect this to be done? Is this a short-term burst? And again, what we're planning on is MediaFlux being able to help us with all that. If we can justify those into metadata flags where we identify, okay, well, they need 50 terabytes, but they only need it for 6 months, and we can set the flags to come back at it. We can start automating some of this workflow where we're not just setting it, forgetting about them, and then in 6 months when we're trying to recover it, it's already gone. So again, those are some of the questions from immediate pushback that we've asked our people, and they're willing to give it, right? I think we've gone too far to the other way of always saying yes. We're now trying to increase, making sure that they are asking for what they need. Most people, their math to identify how much data they need is not there either, right? They'll be like, I need 25 terabytes. And we're like, okay, great. Can you give us the math behind? They're like, oh, wait, I need 5 terabytes, right? But they're always asking for more. So those are some of the tools we do.
The next question, and I know we have 9 minutes left, is how is TigerData being talked about with respect to the research data lifecycle?
So that's the key of data management. So with our PRDS system, the data lifecycle, this should support data from ingest and creation, identification, all the way through to publication. And then from publication, it should be able to go into our data commons. So that's the main partnership that we have with the library and the Princeton Research Data Service is data management lifecycle should be covered in TigerData from the minute it gets in all the way through to publication or destroy, which we don't destroy data. But
Can I add, I guess I feel kind of silly to ask this question, but what do you mean by data management specifically? Or like, do you have like file naming conventions that you're requiring people to adhere to? Do you require documentation? Does every set of data have to have a README file? Like, are you enforcing those best practices, or are you making them write a data management plan for your system? I'm like, what is kind of meant by that?
So within TigerData, we handle that through right now, the core metadata is just metadata fields. It's fields that they have to fill out. And right now those are applied on the project and then they go to every single file that's created. The vision is that there will be metadata schemas, which is a collection of those fields that can be edited and created for each lab or for each project for any particular reason. And there are some standard schemas like bids and fits and a whole bunch of different ones, which we can ingest and create and allow them to use. Or there are other ones that might be fully customizable. And so the plan is for someone who has a README file or someone who has a set structure is we'd be able to handle that customizable metadata and be able to apply it to their project, either at a project down level with all the files, or allow them to customize it even within the file sets. And that's not, right now we have the base level metadata, and we're starting to expand metadata access. The customizable and the standard structured metadata will be, in the next several months, we'll be starting to roll out more of that functionality out with some of our labs.
We got two more questions in the document. How do you handle, how do you back up hundreds of, thinking this is petabytes, PB off campus? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Whoever asked that question.
Our second copy is to a 127 petabyte tape library, IBM Diamondbacks. They go to our co-location that's off campus. And so we have resiliency within multiple data centers within Princeton University on the across the campus. And then we have 127 petabytes of that available for second location copies.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this last question is a follow-up to the research data lifecycle, but it says, do you enforce lifecycle on some or all data?
TigerData, right now, TigerData is the only thing that enforces some version of data management. It's very, very light right now, but the plan is anything within TigerData will be enforced from whatever metadata schemas are approved by our faculty and our steering committee. And then, like my plan is to set that base core level metadata at Scratch and at projects that we have the exact same foundation across the board, with more data management available as you get into TigerData and further into the tiers.
And I'm not sure if I've missed anything from the chat. It's been very, very active. And thank you to Moira, who's been transferring all of this into the notes and then also doing the note taking. Excellent work. Thank you. But we have a few minutes left. If anybody wants to unmute and ask a question or wants to share something kind of related to what you're doing at your campus, we encourage that.
Hi, Beth. It's Ray Scott from Carnegie Mellon. Are you doing anything about any kind of data compliance? I see you have the Citadel for secure data, but if you want to keep track of people who have maybe like dbGaP data or something like that, is there anything special going on there?
I think Kurt must have planted you. Yes, that fell into our lap this summer. So we are working on a data classification structure tied with what we're considering like a risk register decision tree, which is to understand what it is. Citadel right now handles all of our compliance-based stuff that's deemed level 4. So anything with human subjects or anything with actual regulatory DUA compliance, anything what we consider level 3 and below, we want to make sure it finds the right home. So there will be some advancements to TigerData to be secure. Right now we have no encrypted storage in TigerData, but that is coming. But understanding that whole process, we have a timeline by the end of the calendar year to have an RFP out for any kind of secure storage, and that'll be adjusted into TigerData. So yes, we are working on that. Right now, all the heavy compliance required stuff is covered with Citadel, but we understand there is some stuff that might be, there's not so much a compliance risk, but there is maybe a reputation risk or some lower risk that we need to adjust, whether it be with consent or with videos or what have you. That's all being, that's kind of ramped up this summer. And we've been working on with same thing with our faculty to understand how they be able to best identify some of the risk registers that are known better in our research integrity office and with our OGC, et cetera. And so that process is ongoing, and I'm sure Kurt will be talking more and more about that as we get further on. But yes, that's a great question. We are in progress. The vision is that this assessment of any of the data or what you're trying to put into a service would be done beforehand, and then we would direct you to the proper location.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did see a comment about wanting an AI project curation primers. I'm not sure if that's, my brain goes to the data curation network. Shout out to them when I think about primers, but is that something different that you mean? So I don't know if Mary Ellen Sloan is still on the call, but, and then the very last question.
Yeah, she answered in chat the same. Okay.
Okay. The very last question would be, do you have any cloud platform for active or archival data?
Not yet. And mainly because the cost at the scale that we're doing it was just crazy high, right? It was one of those things that even Princeton with people from Google, Microsoft, and everywhere else on the board, it didn't change the cost. It would have been like over $30 million a year for us to do some kind of thing in the cloud at the scale we wanted to do it. I would personally like to see a first copy tape, second copy Glacier at some point. We just haven't gotten around to that. We're quite kind of okay with the tiers that we have right now, and we have the space available. But I do envision that coming at some point in time, more for really, really cool cold data.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information and really inspiring data management and showing us a really good example of a great workflow. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all the people that attended today. Again, Beth has promised to share the slides. If you want to just go ahead and email those to me, and I'll get them up in our folder and connected to the document. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you at another call. And thank you to Ray, who has joined the steering committee as of today. Thank you. So we'll see everyone later. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.